Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Two Stewards Show. And if it's your first time, welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Thank you for joining us. My name's Mark. I'm here with Brent.
Hello, everybody.
And we want to... yeah, puberty is hard, eh, Brent?
Yeah, maybe it's this water from Quebec.
Oh, you're going to start speaking with an accent soon. Or just, worse English. In any case, what are we talking about? We want to be a little bit positive this time.
We were talking about cockroaches.
Yep.
And breakdancing.
Yeah, that's right.
Other negative things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, so one bit of feedback we have, or I've gotten anyways, is like, hey, just listen to your podcast. Thanks a lot. Now I'm depressed.
I shouldn't laugh about that. Yeah. I have that too. When I'm feeling too good about myself, I go listen to the podcast.
That's for a different reason, though.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it is easy to look at the world and look at current events, which we do from time to time, and just be a little bit downcast because of what's going on, right?
It's hard to look at current events and not be downcast, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Everywhere you look, it's like,
yeah.
Especially if you're Canadian, like, what good news have we had in the last while, right? We've got like, terror attack that was just foiled.
Yeah.
But not because of our own intelligence services, right? Only because we got a tip from foreign agency. So like, we don't even know what's going on in our country. Our immigration policy is like absurd and leads to this kind of thing. Housing is, ridiculously pricing. Homelessness everywhere. Inflation has run away. I don't know. And now for the negative parts.
Yeah. You got a long list of... Yeah, and even last episode we talked to Anthony, right? And there's signs of corruption everywhere. And even people who don't necessarily share the Christian faith also see that, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of an eye-opening thing too, right? You don't always think that, okay, well, Christians see evil in the world, but people who don't confess Christ also are experiencing all the same things.
Yeah.
Are pointing to,
absolutely.
What's the problem? So we want to be positive, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. For a change, let's try it. Yeah. We'll see how the ratings are, okay?
This is the Two Stewards Show, the flip side of the fiat coin.
Okay. Is this heads or tails?
But we should talk about fiat system and how corrupted it is.
I think we've done that enough for the first 50 episodes. No, but we talk about turmoil in the world. We talk about how there's, we're going to be starting sort of a new era, a new age. And whenever that happens, there's usually some kind of turmoil, right?
Yeah.
And that can be hard and there can be suffering, but there's also a lot of positive in that, right? And often what comes out of times of turmoil is something positive, right? Whether it's technological advancement or a reordering of society, cultural advancements, if there is such a thing. Right. And so those are some of the things we wanted to talk about now. Like what do you do in a time like now when everything is kind of topsy-turvy and there's, it seems like there's the battle between left and right and they're pushing and pulling and then you realize like maybe it's all a facade and it's really the same side of one coin and there's actually other forces at play and I want to develop that theme a little bit in upcoming, not the next few episodes, but further down, especially when we talk to Hervoye from Geopolitics and Empire. Yeah. But, what do you do?
When you get an email in the middle of your podcast.
Yeah, what do you do?
Do you respond?
But what can you do? And I mean, the good news is like there's a ton that you can do. And most of it doesn't have to do with actually what's happening in the world. A lot of this stuff, and, we're talking from a Christian perspective here as well. Like there are some practical things, but also as Christians, what can you do? Whether the world is, in a wonderful, peaceful time, which is almost never, but we can have periods that seem peaceful.
Do you think that what's happening, the turmoil that we're talking about, is it's abandoning something? Like people and culture, governments, whatever, they're abandoning things. Is that?
Well, I think we have abandoned So just strictly speaking in the West, right? We've abandoned sort of that Judeo-Christian framework.
Yeah.
Right. And that, especially in modern times, right? If we go through these quicker cycles, right? Starting in the 60s, and then we kind of see how that progressed through, over the next 50, 60 years into where we are now. We've abandoned that, and we've tried to have something else in its place and realize like that's empty. And you can see the progression, right? Postmodernism to post-truth, political correctness to different ideologies to woke and DEI, transgender movements, right? All these things that progressively become more and more absurd and leave actual truth and actual observable phenomenon behind in favor of feelings. And now people are starting to abandon that. I think people are disillusioned with that, right?
What's next? Yeah. Well,
so yeah, we're abandoning something and looking for the next thing.
So here's maybe a way to frame this. Like when I think about going through and really thriving in turmoil in the midst of like chaos in the world, you have to acknowledge that there's going to be suffering, right? Like we're going to go through difficulty. It's not going to be like, the world's chaos and I'm just having my own happy little thing and I'm doing great and everyone else. Like you're going to be impacted, right? And your family and your culture, like even your church is going to have, attacks, your school, whatever it is in your life, it's all going to be impacted by what's going on in the world and the economy, right? Like you might try to thrive, but you're living in an economic reality that makes it really difficult, right? So there's going to be things that you're going to have to suffer. And I think the Bible talks about that too, right? Like, be prepared as Christians to suffer for your faith. Be prepared that, have a like mind like Christ, right? Have the same mind. Mark's posing for the picture. But no, Christ suffered in the flesh. So arm yourself with the same way of thinking.
I wasn't laughing. I just realized sometimes we have these inside jokes. And when you're listening, you don't catch them. So Gid was just doing some
photography,
publicity photos, and I was just flexing accidentally for him. Anyways, I wasn't laughing at you, Brent. Carry on.
Or the Bible. Okay.
No.
So I guess the question is, what is worth suffering for? Right. And those are the things that you can kind of go back to and build upon. And if maybe we identify those as positive things we can focus on to help us thrive in turmoil.
And I would say
if that's a helpful way to frame this.
No, I think so. As a counterpoint or maybe a different.
See, we always have to argue.
Well, you have to.
But my pictures were just so boring.
That's what our press agent said.
Flexing.
Yeah. Well, it's the good steward, bad steward.
Okay.
But no, as a bit of a counterpoint to that, there's lots of stuff going on. It's going to impact us, but you can also limit that, and you have to figure out like what is worth actually being impacted by.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, I don't watch we don't watch TV.
Yeah.
We don't have cable, and I just discovered because we have streaming services, and I discovered on one of our streaming services they actually have some live TV channels and stuff. So I'm like, oh, okay, let's, see what's on there. And like just going through and like there's absolutely nothing that interests me or that has any value.
Yeah.
And like, things like watching the news and watching cable news networks and all this stuff. Like I haven't done that in years. And I did it and I just realized there's absolutely no reason for me to put myself through this.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're constantly watching the news, and I'm not saying don't watch the news, but maybe I am saying don't watch the news, but there are certain things that you can remove from your life, and you remove that, it doesn't change your life at all.
Yeah, so you're telling people to turn off our show.
No, not our show. Okay. Ours listen to.
The news.
All the other ones. No, but a lot of, I hate to say the mainstream media, because then you sound a bit like a conspiracy theorist, but a lot of this stuff that we take for granted, like even social media, right? People who don't have it, wow, they still are able to live their life without.
In a very social way, too.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things where, and especially for young people, I think they feel this because they've grown up with social media, maybe not social media, but with so many sources of information that inundate you, and most of it's negative. Right. And that's because negative things sell more than positive. If you can remove some of that stuff from your life, then you remove unnecessary, we talked about this last time too, unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
You're right. There's going to be suffering, and suffering is needed to shape you in your life. But there's a lot of stuff that we put ourselves through that we don't need to.
Yeah.
So like, just don't bother.
Yeah. I feel like maybe we hinted at it last episode, but we never really fully got to it with Anthony. But the Christian faith does have the answer, right?
Yeah.
And that's something we confess. And I think that is a place where so many people in this world don't get to, and then they don't really have the proper context to go through suffering in their life and come out the other side, right?
Well, number one, to understand that there is going to be suffering, right? Like it's just a battle with our kids lately, it seems like.
We keep going to the negative side. Mark, go to the positive things. What can
No, but for, like, we've talked about this too, right? Happiness, right? Like, our goal is happiness. Like, our goal is not happiness. And trying to get just my kids to understand that your goal in life is not your own happiness.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy right now, like, that really doesn't matter too much. Like, we don't want you to be miserable. But your happiness is not the end goal for everybody on the planet.
Yeah.
Or even just for yourself. But we're fed this, right?
Yeah.
But everywhere you turn is like, you deserve it. You need to be happy. Or, if you're not happy in this situation,
what is this?
you need to...
My sister was saying main character syndrome.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. That's just something that I've heard it being called. Like,
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
the world revolves around me and my happiness. I'm the main character, guys. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So anyways, you were saying.
So I think like one thing that probably the first thing is like cultivating your spiritual life, like your walk with the Lord, right? Know God, be in Christ, live for him. That really kind of, when you talk about turning off the negativity or the news or the noise in the world, and you kind of create a void, right? Because we want to seek out information. We find God in his word, and we go down that rabbit hole, right? That's actually a true source of joy. The turmoil in the world kind of exposes like how fragile the securities of the world are, like the things that we actually find security. Like, we're sinfully, we tend towards, I want to find security in this and that, whatever. But when all of a sudden there's like upheaval in the world, you just realize how insecure those things really are, right? At their root. Like, if you trust, I think a previous generation would have trusted the government more than, let's say, the upcoming generation does.
Yeah.
Right? So they'll look at the news with more weight than this generation does, right? So then, but when they see things that are going on, they're like, okay, can I really, like, is this secure? Can I put my trust and hope in this? Like, no, okay. And that's just one example, right?
Yeah, and when you actually, here, let me first...
but that's a practical way to deepen your reliance on God. Like, you see these things, and then all of a sudden, I can't trust in them. I'm going to the source that I can trust, right? Yeah,
so that brings to mind for me Philippians 4. So I'll just read that part way through verse 11. The Apostle Paul speaking, "For I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength." So I think what Paul's talking about there is, your circumstances don't determine we talk about happiness, but he's talking about something a little more deep-seated, right? Yeah. Being content. And just because if you know that you're like in Christ.
At peace.
Yeah, exactly. You're at peace. And whatever happens, you don't need to worry too much about it, right? We're stewards, and we have to react to what's happening around us, but that doesn't determine our inner peace, our inner happiness, right?
I feel like with happiness, there's this satisfaction, right? Like, I want to be filled. I want myself to be satisfied. But if you're not satisfied in Christ, you never will be satisfied, right? So then,
I think we've changed maybe the meaning or the focus of happiness over the last 50 years or whatever to be like very...
I mean, I wasn't around, but you probably did.
Yeah, I remember when they changed it. I remember when the first dictionary came out. No, but it's become a more egotistic or narcissistic thing, right? It's my and only my fulfillment in whatever it is that I desire. So not in relation to other people, but solely in relation to me.
Yeah. So that's a good starting point then. Like your spiritual life, what's the next kind of step here? Because in times of turmoil, obviously we are anchored, but by our faith, and we can build, we can grow in faith, we can build a discipline of prayer, right? We can minister to others, but then
when I sent you some ideas for this episode, I made a note about self-improvement. Okay. And immediately you
red flag,
tore a limb off of me, a strip off of me, whatever the saying is. Right? But there is,
before I think you added that strip right back on.
Yep, I added a few. Well, I was prepared, Brent. Okay. You could tear many strips off of me, and I'll still be okay.
Okay. Well,
no, but I think there is such a thing as Christian self-improvement.
Okay.
Right, and the difference is the sort of the end goal. So we're talking about happiness, how that is very self-driven, self-focused, right, as opposed to being outward. And to the point where that even sounds weird saying it, but the same with self-improvement for Christians, right? And
I guess if you phrase it a little bit differently and say like self-stewardship, like the acknowledgement that what we have, our body, our mind, our intellect, our talents, whatever, is a gift. Okay, I would agree with that. We need to use it, steward it well, right?
Okay, so let me go off on a little tangent here.
I realize the rest of your book is all tangents. Okay.
Brent has a page of notes and different items for the episode. I have one item and then a whole page that's just a tangent.
Okay.
So no, but this is kind of brought up by something we talked about last time. We talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting thing to study when you're doing psychology, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, at its root, this hierarchy of needs, this is not a Christian tool. It can be a useful tool for understanding human behavior and so forth, but not, in the long run. I think as Christians, we'd have some problems with it. So at the bottom, you have physiological needs, right? So just like life, right? Food, water, that kind of stuff. The next step up is safety. So like security and stability in your life, right? The next one up would be the social needs. So the need for love, the need for belonging, right?
Yeah.
The next one up is esteem, which would include like self-esteem. And we've talked about self-esteem before, how that's just one big lie. And I don't say anything halfway,
you're
Brent.
saying also like as you fulfill the needs on one tier, you move up to the next.
If you
humans
think
are
of
almost never satisfied until they reach the pinnacle.
Here's the issue with it, right? The top is self-actualization,
right?
So if you think of it as a pyramid, right, you need each base in order to hit to the next one.
Yeah.
And so on a superficial level, and if you're looking at kids, some of these things you could maybe agree with, right? If you have a child, they need to have like food and water. That's the most basic need, right? And then they need psychologically, they need safety and stability in the home for sure. And then then you have the social aspect where they actually have a place where they belong. So maybe when you're talking about children, right? And then there's esteem. Well, once you get into the self-esteem thing, I think you're treading on dangerous ground. But anyways, the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. And so that means like you can fully become the person that you are or that you can be once you have all those other needs met. So on a physical level, it kind of makes sense. We talked about this last time, right? If you're constantly worried about like where your next meal is coming from, you're probably not too focused on other things. But that's not always the case. So I read from Philippians. That was the Apostle Paul. He's a good example of, that bottom rung of the pyramid, where there were many times when he did not have his basic needs met.
Yeah.
But he still knew how to be content.
Yeah.
But right? Even all through that, right? He was shipwrecked. He was taken prisoner. He was beaten.
Yeah.
people threatened him. He lived in poverty all these times. He also lived in, had enough. And I don't know this for sure, but, I would say probably he never lived in like extreme riches.
Yeah.
Or had, other than maybe in the initial stages of his life when he was a Pharisee and doing well in that, sort of in that regard. But since his conversion anyway. So right away there. And so that's why I worry, like, when people talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and kind of take it as gospel, like, it's not really true. And you can't use that as an excuse to not have a walk with Christ.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, okay, until I get, that better house and the better job and if my finances sorted out, then I'll kind of talk about Jesus or look at that or focus on that.
You see that
right?
in the Lord's Prayer, right? That give us this day our daily bread is just a constant, like this is supposed to be a prayer that you pray on a daily basis, like, acknowledging that God will provide every day what you need for that day.
Yeah, exactly. Right off the hop, we don't necessarily buy that, all of that. But the problem, I think, is at the top. The self-actualization thing, right? As Christians, we confess we need to become more and more like Christ. Not to attain that for ourselves as the pinnacle of human achievement.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where people often get it wrong. And it's a sort of a popular concept, and it's a new age concept. And this is another thing I want to develop in the coming weeks as well, is looking at some of the sort of new age movements, right? Self-actualization is...
I've been living in the new age ever since I was born. For you, this is like a new thing. I don't know.
No, it's true. Some people have seen that sort of that paradigm shift, but we're talking like from the 70s on.
Yeah.
Age of Aquarius and things like this. But the idea is that you can achieve a nirvana almost in this life, on this earth, through achieving your fullest potential. And you will hear people use words like, Christ consciousness, and things like that should make your ears perk up, because like, what are they talking about here?
Yeah.
Right. And so part of that is the idea that all faiths are kind of on a converging road, right? Whether you're a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim or whatever, we all just want to go to that higher state of enlightenment. And they're all different paths to get there, right? Whereas we confess
like very human
an
focus.
Exclusionary gospel.
Yeah.
Or an exclusive gospel, right? Where Jesus Christ is the only way.
Yeah.
It's not Buddha. It's not Allah. It's not anybody else. It's Jesus Christ. And, you can make your circumstances better in your life for sure. And, you can be more grounded, or... I don't know, do benefits to your nervous system by meditating every day. Or, even mindfulness, right? This is being promoted. It's part of the same agenda.
So we're going to have...
supplanting what the Bible teaches us.
Yeah, when you say that word, I think... So we're way on tangents already. But we're going to have C.R. Wiley on. So I don't know if anybody knows him, but go read his books before next week.
He was also... I was chasing the Roadrunner, right?
I don't know. Did he write something like that?
The Wiley Coyote. Come on.
Trying to be serious, Mark.
Well, I'm not.
But no, so he talks about the downgrading of words, right? And we go from, a word that has a very specific meaning. And he talks about how, we can't really have a true synonym of a word, because you end up with like no word can substitute for another word in its actual meaning. And when you talk about like mindfulness, you're kind of like really dumb down what is actually at the core, right? It almost sounds like, you started with Christianity, you started with religion, and then you've dumbed it down to like devotions, and then like, thinking, and now it's just mindfulness, and it's like, what does that mean, right?
I'd love to get his take on that too.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have a lot of questions for him.
But that reminds me, it is almost synonym spice season. So I just want to put that out there, right? Fall is coming.
I had to throw that autumn. In there. All right.
Autumn.
So the second thing after your faith is family and household. That's on my list. You only have one item. I got like 4 here. So family. Now start a family. You text me, okay, we've got to start a family. I'm like, no, we're not starting a family, Mark. Like, you got yours, I got mine. But that is something that people can do in times of turmoil. But you made the point that no, not everybody can just start a family because you need like a spouse.
Yeah, I mean it's not. It's
like a practice.
It's a voluntary, and there's two people involved in this.
Hey, everybody, start a family. Like it doesn't go like that.
No, but okay. So there are concrete steps you can take to improve your life, and again, it's not all about your happiness, but avoid needless suffering. I think, right, and embrace the suffering that is needful. So I just want to get back to the sort of self-improvement thing, right? I think
tangent we were on earlier.
My earlier tangent, you cut me off. No, but there's a few things that you can do, right? So number one, like on the sort of mental and emotional side, is you can be in the Bible. You can get to know your Bible, and you can develop a prayer life. You can have a relationship with Jesus, right? These are all things that you don't depend on external circumstances.
Yeah, and no one can stop you.
And that, nobody will stop you from doing this unless you live in a spot where they physically stop you. But even then, right? I was just reading through Daniel with the kids, and, Daniel still persevered, and they threw him in the lion's den. Right? But there's other things you can do as well. So I'm thinking around like physical fitness, for example. Right? If we are stewards and we're stewarding these bodies that we have, don't look at me like that. I know I'm not the best example, Brent, but we can steward our bodies to take care of them. So because, we've been given them, so let's take care of them, right? And so because we're talking about starting a family, and, I've talked to young men about this before, and, some people are like, well, I can't find a girlfriend. Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes
I want to hear what you say next.
Well, because sometimes I look at them and go like, duh, like, of course. Right? And it's, I don't know. I'm not the most tactful person, Brent.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, there are things that you can do. And, if things around you aren't working out, or if things aren't working out for you in your life, like the first thing you got to look at is
I'm just Googling what a politically correct way to say duh is.
No, but if you're not content in your life, like we just read about what is the secret to being content. Like, go look that up. Go read your Bible and figure out, right? Are you being more influenced by external events and the things that are happening in the world? Is that what's getting you down? Like, there's a solution for that. Go read the Bible. Go read what is going to happen in the world, right? Develop your prayer life, right? And you want to talk about mindfulness or meditation, like go back to prayer. And so that the object of your meditation isn't you, it's God, right? But that's something you can do. But my point is, people complain about their circumstances without taking the steps to do them. And so physical fitness, I think, will fit into that. And this sounds really shallow, right? But sometimes I'll see a guy who, like, all you do is eat. We always rag on these guys, right? But you live in your parents' basement and you play video games and you eat pizza. Yeah. So, like, you know what? Like, what woman is going to look at you and be like, that is the man I want to start a family with? Yeah. Right? And, not that physical appearance is everything. I get it. But there are some things that are in your control. Yeah. And if you're young and you're, sort of dating age or whatever, like, that's probably the best shape you're going to be in for most people. Yeah. Not necessarily, and you can have a commitment to fitness and stuff, but like, that's when you should be at the top of your game. Okay. And because it's all downhill from there, kids.
Wise words. Okay.
No, but I mean, like, if you can't find a partner to date, at least with a view to marriage, like, why is that? Maybe just have a look in the mirror, and maybe the problem is you. Maybe it's not everybody else, because this is another part of our culture, right? And there's nothing is ever your fault. And we're taught that. Yeah. Right. And, I can rag on like the participation trophies and whatever, like nobody ever actually wins anything. Everybody wins. And it's like, no, there's winners and losers, and there's consequences to your actions. So take a little bit of responsibility for your life. Yeah. And like, it sounds, I don't know, sounds mean. It sounds untactful, but it's just the truth. Right? If starting a family, which we talk about a lot, if that's your goal, be the kind of person, whether you're a man or woman, that somebody else wants to start a family with. And that's, the first thing is not your physical appearance. although that helps, right? But the first thing would be, if you want a godly husband or a wife, well, you need to be that person.
Yeah.
And just as a corollary, I'll let you jump in a second, right? Finding the husband or the wife of your dreams, that's not the way to go, right? You need to be fully, fully centered in Christ. You need to be secure. You need to be content before you take that step. Don't look to a partner to fulfill it for you, because they're going to disappoint you. And my wife will tell you this. It's true. Okay. Disappoint her all the time.
Yeah. Well, no, to jump on that and to kind of add on that, I guess being firm in your faith and having convictions also helps you stand firm when we talk about turmoil in the world, right? And turbulent times economically, maybe you lose your job, whatever. Yeah. But I think especially for men, like, you need to lead your household. Okay. Having that solid faith yourself and building upon that with devotions with the Lord, like that, it attracts a certain person, right? If you want a spouse, that's going to attract the right kind of spouse to you. So I agree with what you said. Maybe a little bit less,
a little more tactful. Sure. Good steward, bad steward.
Yeah. So we're going through C.R. Wiley's books, and hopefully next time we have the opportunity to ask him some more questions. But he talks very specifically about the household, and he would say, like, probably the household is kind of the basic building block of kind of society and all the institutions that we have. And since the household's been eroded, we end up with a lot of these cultural problems that we have. And, in reality, it's been eroded to the point where, I guess he points the blame on fathers or men, and specifically because they're the head of the household, saying, like, there is just no example of what a good household looks like. You have to go back to the Bible. You have to start, and you have to kind of create these principles. And he kind of lines them all out. And one of them, which you also texted me, was start a business, or and that kind of overlaps with the productivity of the household, right? Yeah. And I was really intrigued by that because, there's a tendency, I think, in the last, he would say probably the last 200 years, but for people to just go get a job, right? Rely on the system. And we've talked about, the social welfare system and some of the complications with that, right? Where if somebody, the Christian principle of, like, helping other people has kind of been foisted onto the government, and saying, the government helps other people with the social welfare programs that they fund through our taxes, which is them taking money from us. So I don't have to do anything to help people. It's that same sort of, like, you say, cast the blame on other people, right? Like, I can't get a spouse because they or her or he, whatever, right? It's never taking personal responsibility for, like my physical fitness or my walk with the Lord or my, I'm stuck in this basement, whatever, right? Or I don't help people because those people do, right? And all of those things. But then he also makes the comment and the connection to economy, right? Like, and I think people, it's like, Brent, you always try to get me to start a business. And I'm like, well, I think that's important. And I feel like this Wiley fellow, who we're hopefully going to have on, he's kind of putting words in my mouth, like, better than I can, I guess, like, explaining why I think that's important. And it used to be a lot more common, right? Like, a household, you would have the trade, or there'd be certain economy that would happen within the household. The husband and wife were both involved. Their kids were involved. Their kids had to be depended upon, right? So they had responsibilities from a very young age. They contributed. They felt like they had need. There was a legacy there. Like, when you get older, this business, this economic enterprise is going to be passed down. There's values you can instill in your children, like, and then, your children become different. And this kind of overlaps with family, right? Like, productivity and family kind of mesh together. It's funny because everywhere we drive now, my wife is reading Little House in the Big Woods or Little House on the Prairie. We're going through this with the kids, right? And I'm just, like, sitting there like, man, this guy, the Pa character is like, I don't think I could make a house out of logs. I don't think I could go and shoot a deer and, like, feed my whole family in a fireplace that I built and, like, out in the middle of the grass by myself, like, and that was 100 years ago, probably.
A different paradigm for sure.
Yeah, but his point, or my point in bringing that up, is also, like, that's a context where he's like the economy of the household, and the household as like a basic building block. Like the kids were part of that. The kids had a responsibility. The husband and wife work together. And what Wiley would say is that's kind of a picture of Christ in the church, right? And that the gospel goes through that in so much detail. Like what is the consummation of all things at the end time is Christ, the husband, marrying the bride, the church. And if you start diving into that and fleshing it out throughout Scripture, you can really see the beauty of the family metaphor in that relationship, right? That's why we're brothers and sisters in Christ. Well, we're brothers, but listeners might be sisters, in Christ, right? We're united as a family.
Well, and when you look at it that way, then you realize the importance of sacrifice, because that's Christ's ultimate purpose on earth, was to sacrifice himself, and his purpose as the bridegroom was to sacrifice himself. It wasn't to become the master of the house, all
of the kingdom. Yeah, even though he is the king.
he already is. But the lesson for and especially for men who are listening, right? If you're the master of your household, that means you have to sacrifice yourself for that household. It doesn't mean you're like, "Yay, look at me!" and right. And this is where you get the complaints about the patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
Some of which, like, I don't buy the patriarchy nonsense, but I do understand that men abuse headship.
Yeah.
And for sure that's a thing. But I want to touch back on a couple things, right? So one that just popped up in my mind was the incel movement. Have you heard of this?
No.
Incel? So that's involuntary celibates.
Okay.
And basically this is, it's a growing movement of men who, the name kind of says it, right? They're involuntary celibates. So, of course, we don't preach
like
sex outside of
voluntary
marriage.
celibates would be like monks.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But so this is basically men who can't get a date. Right. And
but they celebrate it, or they...
No, they don't celebrate it, but they've kind of, because of the internet, there's an online community, and they realize hey, there's a lot of us.
Right.
And it kind of goes back to my comment about, living in the basement playing video games, right? There's a lot of hatred towards women, actually. And, some of the... so the hatred is not justified, but we see in society a growing narcissism. That's both men and women. But this is one thing that these men really latch on to, and is like, these women are they're not dateable, and they're all terrible. And, they want to find a woman, but they can't. And they blame women. So this is a big movement. And I just want to put it out there,
go Google it, everybody.
Well, you don't have to, but I mean, if you're kind of feeling that way, be aware of what's actually going on, and whatever people are telling you, it's not true. Look in the mirror. Don't go pointing the finger at other people. And just goes back to my earlier point about be the kind of person that someone would want to date. But it's sort of a cultural phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
The next thing you were talking about, I just wrote down here, be useful, right? You're talking about
Little House on the Prairie.
Pa, what was his name? I can't remember what the family name was anymore.
Pa.
No, it was just Pa,
Laura
right?
Ingalls Wilder.
Yeah. Anyway,
Pa Wilder? I don't know.
But he was a useful guy, right? Like you said, he could build a log cabin, he could do this, he could do that. And then we think about, our own skills.
Yeah.
Right?
I
think it's very, but also, I mean, we're not necessarily called to go build a house on the prairie.
And that's one of the things I want to ask Wiley about is do all these things in the context of the modern era where we have technology, we have information technology, we have smartphones, we have these reality. We can't just go start a prairie house. The prairies are settled.
No, but I mean, you can develop your skills in sort of on the building front, for example. And why? Well, number one is to benefit other people. This is the idea, again, of sacrifice, right? If you are just content to go to your job, you talk about the wage earners as well, right?
Yeah.
Kind of syndrome that we have, right? Where you see a lot of people do this. I'll work my 9 to 5, and then I come home, and now it's me time.
Yeah.
Right. And there's never any self-improvement. Sorry to trigger you, Brent, by saying self-improvement. But there's never any new skills learned. And this is not everybody for sure.
Yeah.
But this is a large part because we're just content in what we are. And there's no community. There's no church.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you're in a church, right, the idea of the church is that it's a body.
Yeah.
And there's all different parts and they serve different functions. But that doesn't mean you're stuck or you're pigeonholed into that role as a toe or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And the gifts that you have, the skills that you have are not for you, right? You can use them for sure, but they're meant to benefit other people as well.
Yeah.
And so we see this when we look for men who can serve as an elder or a deacon or whatever. Like, what skills do they have that would be relevant? And so that may not be building a house, but maybe that's like, I don't know, really knowing how to prepare a tax return, or marketing, or it could be could be building. Right? That's a very useful skill.
Host of other things.
And I think it's useful for men to know some of these traditional skills, because I don't know if everything ever goes to pot. I'm not necessarily like one of these survivalist guys, but you should know how to fix stuff, right, around the house, so that you're not relying on know how to grow some basic
Mark
foods. Yeah, don't rely on me. Everybody's going to be calling me. And then so the last note I had here. See what you started, Brent?
Yeah, notes.
No, but we often feel sort of at the mercy of the winds of culture and the storm that is gathering, right? And this causes anxiety and depression and stuff. And like, what can I do? I'm just one person. We talked about a few things that we can do, but so you can change yourself. You can make yourself more resilient. You can be more grounded in the Word of God. But one of the things that we can actually do to provide a counter to the culture that we see is things that we're talking about. So one of them, again, starting a family, right? Having a household. This is actually a tangible thing. You build your own little block. And if you think of it as building a foundation, right? If we had all these little blocks of households and they could come together and they could build a foundation for something real solid, right? You're providing something there, but you're also training the next generation of people to build. Which is
interesting, because that kind of goes back to what I was saying, where we tend to offset all of our responsibilities to other things. In the field of education, we do the same thing, right? Like, you might have, let's say, I have a good household, I have a wife or a husband, and we have some kids, and we have a house. Like, what's wrong with this? Well, yeah, and then you send your kids off to school, and that's great, right? But it doesn't mean your responsibilities are negated or gone, right? Like,
no,
the home and the household is still like the epicenter for spiritual education, moral guidance, right? Like, even academic, all of these things, they kind of have to stem from that, and the economic angle is in there as well, right? Like, parents can't just be like, all right, I'm going to work, you go to school, we'll come back and we'll watch TV when you get home. Like, and that's what and Wiley kind of makes this point too in his book about the household and the war for the cosmos. Like, the household's been kind of gutted of its purpose and meaning, and now we end up with basically just a recreation center where people of sheer genetics come to watch the same shows, or like, even now we're not even watching the same shows. We're all on our own devices in separate rooms, we're basically paying the same utility bills. That's the only connection we have as a family, right? So strip that all away. Like, what do you have left? Just nothing, right? Like, isolated individuals trying to achieve self-actualization, being more and more depressed. So how do you flip that around? And what's the Christian mindset towards that? Well, like, no, the man is the head of the household. He exists inside of a hierarchy under God, right? Like, God is his head, or Christ is his head. Well, he has to mimic that relationship inside of his household. And Wiley uses the term microcosm, right? Like, the cosmos is the big one. The microcosm is your household.
Yeah.
Mimic that picture of Christ in the church in your household, and you have a great responsibility. So,
well, it's interesting. I'm just thinking about that image from earlier that I had of you work your 9 to 5, you come home, and so the dad comes home, you crack open a beer, and it's like, okay, that's it. I don't want to. Yeah. But you can't. Your response. Fine, you can come home and have a beer, but your responsibilities don't end there, right? If there's children around, or even if there's a wife, it's not like now it's just self-indulgence time. It's me time, right? It's like, oh yeah, now I have
please myself.
Yeah, I have my own, not my own business, but it does kind of tie into the mindset of having your own business where your responsibilities don't end just because a certain hour
go into that a little bit
passed.
more of starting your own business. Like I can see the value of entrepreneurship and sole proprietorship, like being proprietors, right? Like having your own enterprise, having the responsibility of that, having the freedom of that, having that rooted in your family, even like having the support of your spouse and maybe even your kids. I don't know if it necessarily has to be an enterprise. And I think in our church community, there's a lot more entrepreneurship minded people. I don't know what that is, but is there a biblical basis for that? I'm just trying to think. Like there is almost this self-reliance in a sense, like you're more self-sufficient, you're less dependent on the economy or whatever if you have your own source of production or whatever in your house.
I don't know if it's necessarily sort of the self-reliance or the sort of self-centered angle, but I mean, we've read about it before, right? Like go, again, Paul talking, right? Go, what is it? Work with your hands. Like steal no longer, but work with your hands so that you may be able to provide for those in need. So it's kind of the idea again, and like, so these are generalizations if you're listening, right? And if you have a job, we're not like totally trashing you. We're trashing you a little bit. But no, but it's harder as a wage earner to be able to help more people, at least financially, right? And I mean, there's other gifts you have, and certainly there's ways around it. But I think maybe that's part of the, in our context anyways, we're sort of familiar with the idea that if you want to have a school, you got to build it. If you want to have a church, you got to build it.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to help you.
Yeah.
So that means...
In fact, they're going to try and hinder you.
Yeah. So especially the sort of our predecessors, older generations of immigrants who came to this country and wanted to have churches and schools and stuff, right? They built them all themselves. And you need more resources to do that. So that's, I think, where kind of the idea of, having your own business... because the idea is, essentially, I think that you have more than you need eventually, right? Not so that you can build great storehouses for yourself, but so that you can provide for others in need. And it's easier to do that.
Yeah.
And the other angle too, and I sort of reflect on my journey with my wife too, right? We both had jobs when we were married, first married and having children and shuttling kids around to like not daycare, but like people who would watch the kids, right? And she was a nurse doing shift work, so sometimes like we would hardly see each other, and eventually we're like, okay, we got to change this. So she stayed home, and then we also started a business. And the idea, this wasn't like clearly coalesced in our minds, but maybe vaguely. But the idea is like, we can have a household where we can both be around, sort of, like you still got to go out and work, but where we can both participate in the business, and we can be around for our kids. Like they still go to school, we're not homeschooling, but we can be around more for them instead of like just ships in the night. And just sort of have that. I mean, I wasn't thinking of, Little House on the Prairie or what you're talking about with Wiley and the household, but I kind of like that idea, right? Where you have a family business or maybe a couple family businesses, right? We have several businesses and not huge, big ones. And, if you're listening, like just small time.
An enterprise that makes money for your house that you don't have to go out and,
Yeah. And, our kids are young, so they don't participate that much, although often if I'm out, like sometimes Kirsten will have to take the kids to a property to like troubleshoot something or to check something out. So they understand the concept of what we do for sure. And I think they were pulling weeds at a property last week. So, but anyways, I guess that's an example. That's not for everyone, but you're talking about the household and how hard it is. And like part of that is the idea that the husband and the wife are both working.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think it's problematic, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to raise
that's some
children.
of the complaints we hear, right? When we talk about young people getting into the real estate market, it's always that sort of thing, right? Well, like we want to do this, we want to have a job, or like, you know, one person working and then the other person at home, but just not possible. Okay. But going back to like starting a business, I feel like maybe it's not necessarily just starting a business, but what you're trying to do is like reclaim some of the productive capacity of your household, like growing food, for example.
Yeah.
Like everything in this world right now, we rely on other people. We rely on outside. Like it's
you have one specialization.
Yeah, it's a consumeristic mindset, and I wonder if that's. I'm just trying to reconcile it with a Christian mindset and trying to see if that's a good approach to pursue. Because on the one hand, we do like division of labor and we like everyone being good at what they're good at, but it becomes a little bit of an issue, I guess, if you're overwhelmed by this consumerist mindset where, like, you know, if I need this, I just go there and I buy it, and you end up, I don't know.
It's interesting. I mean, I think certainly the household, right? When you read about households a ton, right? And you can argue like, okay, Israel was an agrarian society and we're not that anymore, so that doesn't apply. But you look at the New Testament, certainly there's tons, you know, I think of the Philippian jailer and his household, right? There's still the idea of households where there's a cohesive unit that is together, is working for the common good and, you know, the social good as well. So there's a social fabric. And no, I think there's something to that. I look forward to talking to Mr. Wiley.
I think we pumped him up pretty good in this episode.
Yeah, he better be good. But anyways, having what is a positive thing? A beautiful household, right? And again, the Bible has this, you know, you read through Proverbs, right? You have this picture of a household that is productive and, you know, the husband and the wife are quote unquote fulfilled, I think, right? Because they both have productive roles and there's children and they serve the Lord.
Yeah.
It can be a beautiful thing in a society of broken families. And, you know, just broken lives and broken people. Not to say that you know, you start a family, and that's like all your problems are ended, right? In some respects, they're only just beginning. But they're good.
Proverbs
these are good problems, right?
Yeah. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding, it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. What does that mean?
Well, so our friends at the Stewardology podcast were talking about this as well, right? And I don't know if it was this text or something similar, where I think the verse is, the house of the wise is filled with good and precious things.
Yeah. Very, very similar to this.
Not the house of the rich.
Yeah.
The house of the wise.
Yeah.
So that right away you see there, like, okay, that means if you're wise, you're going to put something away for times of trouble or maybe for other people, but you've got a house that is full of, you know, stuff that you can use, whether it's food or whatever it is. You have reserves. So it's just another plug for maybe small business or household business, I guess, is the one. But so anyways, the point is starting a family is a very concrete thing that you can do. And I know not everybody can do it and it's hard and there's barriers, but you know, it's if
maybe you should start a business and helping people start families, Mark. Kill two birds with one stone here.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, the final thing I have on my list to wrap this up is stewardship over what you do have, because in times of turmoil, you acknowledge that everything that you do have is from God, and we are born the receivers of gifts, right? We've been blessed, like even with life. So what gives your life purpose, right? And as a Christian, we confess that our purpose is in Christ and living for him. So everything we have is a gift. How do we steward it? And that kind of brings all of these things together, right? Like our life, our faith, those are gifts. Even our faith, right, is a gift.
Yeah.
If you have a household and a family, it's not going to be perfect, but it is a gift. It's a blessing. So use it, right? Don't let it sit there. You have a responsibility as a Christian, I believe, not to squander it. And you can enjoy it certainly, but not in a passive sense of, bring me bring me whatever pleases me. Bring me Montelier water or a Coca-Cola while I sit here. Like, yeah, that's not really the sense that we're going for. It's more, enjoy it, but work at it, use it, right? And that's strive. And those are words that I think Christians are a lot familiar with.
Well, and your intelligence and your capacity to learn is also a gift. So like learn things, right? And then use those for the benefit of others. We've talked about, maybe you start your own business. Well, that's not for everyone. Like I get it. It's not for everyone. But you could start
a garden.
Well, you could start a community garden. You could start your own garden and give the excess to neighbors. But you could start like a nonprofit organization, right? And we can think of
start a podcast.
Come on, man. It's down on the list. Okay. I'm not there yet.
Sorry.
No, but you think of organizations like Indwell, for example.
Yeah.
There's
so
many.
Have them on, by the way.
Yes.
I'm going to give Jeff Nevin a call.
There's so many things like that where people use their skills and their talents to benefit other people. And, maybe you would never have your own business, but so many different organizations like that or even one time, whether it's a fundraiser, I can think of people in our church who do that as well, right? Like back to school, providing backpacks for people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, you see signs all over the place.
Yeah, I think we started that.
Yeah.
But no, we didn't. But,
Mark's the inventor of the backpack also.
Wow, that's a funny story, Brent.
Okay.
It turns out to be true back in 1821.
Okay.
Okay, but then you also mentioned podcast. So this is where I'm talking about, like, we're in a time of upheaval and whatever else, but also a time of, like, widespread technology that's available to everyone. And why not start a podcast?
Yeah.
Right? Like we did.
Yeah.
Not to get rich and famous, although we are. No, we're not. But like if you have specialized knowledge or if you got something to say, like you can get out there and you can reach potentially like millions of people.
Or even if in our case, we have a desire to learn from people who are whatever would you say, rich and talented or talented and famous? Yeah. Smart people. We want to learn from smart people. If you're a smart person listening, give us a call.
Yeah, please, we need it. I've talked to, I mentioned this off air, but I've talked to several people anyways who are like, and maybe it's because they're looking at us and they're like, if a couple of morons like you can start a podcast and keep it going for a while, like I could probably do that too. So you let this be your inspiration, right?
You sure can.
If you have a gift or,
even if you don't.
But it's one small example of something that you can do.
Mark, you're going to be the co-host of like 30 podcasts after this. The Pasta Podcast with Mark.
Oh, I like that. That's a good idea. So
we should wrap it up.
It's a practical example of what you can do. Yeah, find a good podcast partner as well. I highly recommend it so that when you get off track, they
bring you back on. Shut the episode down.
Yeah.
Book a good guest for next time. So, folks, just to kind of highlight that. So we are going to have a guest on. We have a few guests in the works, and we're really thankful for that. C.R. Wiley, Christopher Wiley, he's an author. He has his own podcast called the Theology Pugcast. So he's agreed to come on the show, and he's wrote The Household and the War for the Cosmos, and then Man of the House. I think I've seen these books on people's shelves, and a few other books I think you mentioned In the House of Tom Bombadil. So we're excited to have him on and kind of pick his brain about kind of this stuff as well. What is a Christian perspective on household? And obviously from our context, we're talking about stewardship. How can we use what we've been given, right? And excited to have him on.
Yeah, awesome.
So next time,
Okay, well, thanks for listening to our ramblings, folks. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.